Guys, just a little overview on what we have for equipment and how it works, and kind of some safety things and some pre-op checks that we do before we start drilling every day. First, operation of the rig. The drill bit is spun by hydraulic pump. The water goes through the pipe by an air pump we've got. And then the cuttings come up. That's basically drilling condensed down into 15 seconds. Now to operate that, we'll kind of go over the stuff and how it all works and what you guys need to be looking for. We have two trailers. One trailer is the drill rig over here. That's the part that actually does the drilling and has the mud pit on it. This engine here, all it does is run two hydraulic pumps. The hydraulic pumps run the mast going up and down, they run the winch, they run the turn head on the top head, and they run the slip. Everything hydraulics on here as far as the drilling. That engine, all it does is move the oil. It doesn't do anything with the water. The air compressor does most of the work as far as moving the water. 350 CFM air compressor, 120 PSI. We've got two lines coming out of it. Right here, this big red hose here always gets hooked up to the water pump. When you guys hook this up, always make sure it's just a twist lock. It goes on and turns, but it's very important that this cable's hooked up. If one of the Africans or if one of you guys were to only put this on about so far, it builds up to 200 PSI and spins off. This thing is just going to go crazy. Okay. Always put this loop on there. Make sure it's on like that. There's no place it's going to go. This line is not pressured up if it's not hooked up to this. So once it blows off, it's only got about 2 seconds and then it'll be done. Make sure that's hooked up. This line pumps air over to the drill rig. You see right here, comes in the top side of that. That air is what manipulates the bladders in there to make the piston pump go back and forth and move the water. Okay. The intake for this pump, it's a little hard to see, but there's a 1090 on the back side of this tank, right through there. That's where the water comes into the pump down here at the bottom. So it's supplied up to here. That piston pump goes back and forth, shoves the water through here at pretty good pressure, goes up this yellow hose here to the top, comes into the top of our top head here, down to our swivel here. Right here is where we'll hook on our pipe. Right now this thing's all the way down. Like if we're at the end of our first pipe or of a pipe, this is where it'll be. When we're drilling, it'll be as high as 15 feet in the air. So that's where the water comes out. Water will go down the hole, through the steel pipe, through the bit, and everything we're cutting, where it's going down, is coming loose from the earth. The water carries it up, as the speed of the water just lifts it, and then it runs out here, down this little trench, into this little pit we've hand dug to the side. Once it falls in here, this pump is a cuttings pump, is run hydraulic off of the engine. It sucks up the water, the dirt, the sand, the rock, anything you can stick in there, it sucks up, pumps back into this green hose, circulates it back through the green hose into this cuttings tank, and just dumps it in right here. This tank we try to keep about yay full of water. If it gets down below here, you're going to lose water on the intake into the pump over there. So we try to keep this thing within just 2 or 3 inches of the top all the time. Once it goes into here, there's a baffle about 2/3 of the way over. The water pours into here and kind of circulates, and all the cuttings, the rock, the sand, everything falls out of it while the water spills over to the side into the intake, so that all stays clean. The other thing we do with the air compressor, there's a small line here on the side. If we're going to drill with foam, see how this red line is hooked up here already. Okay, that red line, you just unroll it, and just pulls out. You hook the red line into just a regular airline fitting right here on the front of the pump. Once it's connected there, this yellow hose is your intake. Kind of like the big hose over there is the intake for the big pump. This is just a miniature version of that. So this hose here, if you're drilling with foam, will go down into these tanks. These tanks, we'll have full of water. and we've been dumping 1 liter of that Halliburton foam solution in them at a time. Drop the hose down in there so it's all the way to the bottom, and then it kicks the water out right here. It's very slow. When this thing's set correctly, it's only surging maybe once every 3 seconds. You'll see the hose kind of throb, kind of like this. That's about where you want it for drilling. Any faster than that and you're pumping a lot of slurry down there, you're not taking advantage of. If it's pumping, the slower it's pumping, the more foam you're going to have out. But we'll have a garden hose that runs from here. This runs along the trailer here. You'll just kind of come up here, and right there where that yellow valve is, there's a little just garden hose connection right on the bottom. That's where you screw that in. You just make sure that's tight, because that's pretty good pressure. Once that's hooked up, you just open that valve and you should be able to blow it out. Now, something we found that we need to do before you switch over from drilling with water to drilling with foam is, because of the way that sits, because we pump all of our water through this line, a lot of sediment builds up in that 3/4 inch pipe. So you need to open that up. We've got rebar here in the toolbox. Take some rebar, jam it up in there, and make sure that thing's clear before you even hook up your hose. That's part of the foam drilling. That just gives you your foam supply. There's nothing in there that actually makes the foam, though. The foam is made by the air we inject into it, real high pressure. This same red air line right now that comes over to the back side of this mud pump that we would use for water, that red line there is just air from the air compressor. We take that off. It's just got a regular fitting, like a beveled fitting, just swivel it off. And then we unclamp this here. Remember, this is the one that usually carries the water to the top of the drill head, but we're going to shove air down there now. So we take this off with this cam lock, and we take that hose off there, and we keep a fitting on the other side that's your buffer. It gets a male cam lock by male threads. Just screw them together. There's channel locks here in the drill box. Just screw them together, and then this one just clamps on. Once you've got that, you've got your solution, your foam solution being pumped from here down there, and then you've got your air being supplied here, and that combination just makes you'll have foam that's a couple feet deep all around the drill site. On the setting, on the foam, you come around here so you can see. There's a little red valve right here. That is all the way off. This is all the way on. You want this hose, the discharge hose, when it's on here, when this thing's pumping, it should be surging about once every 3 seconds. If you've got it wide open like that, this thing's just going pop, 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 pop real fast. So in order for this thing to be set right, it's just about maybe a 1/4 turn out like that. That's about where you want it. Now, when you switch pipes, you got to shut this thing down every time, so you can switch pipes and not get foam sprayed on you. What we found is once you get this thing set, you want to turn your air on and off to control the pump over there at the compressor. It's just a lot simpler than having the Africans or having one of your helpers try to get this thing reset every time. Set this thing once, then do all your on and off between pipes over at the compressor. Something you got to watch though, as you get going deeper, like let's say you set this thing, like when we started at 105 feet, right there was good. As we got down to 150, 160, because of all the back pressure, it wasn't pumping near as much. All of a sudden the hose was surging about once every 6 seconds. So we actually had to open this up a little bit. But use this one only for kind of fine tuning, kind of like a trim. Use this for fine tuning the flow, not for your on and off. Do all your on and off from the compressor. Can you come around here? Now the air is the same way. Remember, we're pumping 2 things when you're using foam down the setup. Come around this way. You got your solution, which we talked about. Your on and off is at the compressor. Your fine tuning is done right there on the pump. This handle right here, labeled mud pump on and off. Remember, if we've got the red line from the air compressor going to the mud pump, that's flowing water. Okay. If we're drilling with water, you just turn this plumb on. Like if we kick that on right now and everything was running, it'd just be going crazy. Just massive amount of water coming through this. When we're trying to pump air down, it doesn't take near as much air. If you put that much air down, you'll be blowing foam 10, 12 feet in the air coming out of the hole, and it's a mess. So when you turn air on, it doesn't need much to make a good solution. When you kick that air on, we just crack it, maybe about to there. and you just kind of take a look, and you'll be able to tell with the foam coming up if you got it thick and if everything's right. But we're just cracking it just until it starts running, and it still runs slow, but you just want to crack that. Guys, as far as your operation here, let's assume for now we're drilling with water. If you're drilling with water, remember the cuttings pump down here in the pit that moves everything coming out of the ground into the tank. Once you start drilling, that lever's right here. When it's down, that cuttings pump is on. That's neutral and reverse. We've never had to reverse it, but if you get a rock or something in there, you can actually reverse that thing and kind of cycle it like that. It'll turn loose. We've dug a lot of clay out of it that way. But for the most part, once you start drilling with water, put that down, leave it down, and it stays down all day. The only time we turn it off is to fire up the engine so we don't have any pressure on the pump when we fire it up. This is your air supply to your main pump. Remember, so if we're drilling with water, as soon as all the pipes hooked up and everything's going, you kick this on, that shoves all your water down hole, and you're ready to start drilling. Never start drilling without that thing running. Otherwise, you're drilling with a dry bit, and you're just going to jam rock and clay right up into the bit. Okay, so we'll start with that off. Lever here is your pull down. Your top head goes up and down two ways. One is what I call your drill, kind of when you want it to settle. You want it to settle as it drills. That's what this one's for. When this thing's engaged like that, that means this thing is very slowly settling down. It could be anywhere from 0 to 500 pounds pressure. If it's up, that means it'll settle back up. And then you've got neutral if you want to just stay put. You've got a selector down here. This selector kind of determines which of these three handles you want to use. Whether it's the bottom three handles, top three handles. When it's up like this, you've got your head rotation. This is your head. So if this is down, that means your bit's turning and you're going in. The only time you would go up is when you're unhooking pipe and you want to spin this out of the pipe. You never want to have pipe on and be going backwards, because you can actually unthread your pipe. And if you unthread your pipe down the hole, it's going to be a very bad day. Breakout wrench. You'll only use this when you pull pipe. This pipe wrench over here to the side, when you're pulling pipe, will be setting just like that. Now, this is a very dangerous pinch point. When the driller is standing up here on the rig, this thing will be about a little higher than this. You'll grab for this, you'll pull down, and this cylinder engages. It pushes the wrench out and actually unscrews the pipe. When that's going on, make sure nobody else's hands are in here except for the driller. If that pipe wrench slips off, you can have your hand crushed here. If it comes over here and pops, it can be here. Anyone else's hands who are in this area, there's a huge pinch point, because this thing comes out about 14 inches. It'll come all the way out to here. It's very important that whoever the driller is using this thing, that everyone else is back from that area. Let the driller who's got control of the wrench manage that thing. And then as soon as your pipe breaks loose, then you put this back up and it sucks it back in. We'll have some video of that in operation here a little later. Mast up and down. Your mast is this whole big thing here, the actual thing that folds down and raises up. So right now it's in the up position. When we travel, it's actually laid down flat across the drill book. We've already got it up because we set up the other night. Once you get the mast up, there's two big pins like this on each side. They've got to be in, otherwise this thing's way too shaky. So drop those in like that and everything's set. Top head up and down. We talked about this one being the drill head. This is the drill part that just kind of lets it settle. If you want to move this thing quickly, like if you're setting pipe or pulling pipe, that's when you use this one. Like if you drill down to this point and you're ready to put on another pipe, you will don't use this to go all the way back up to make room for the second pipe. It's way too slow. You'll actually flip this down. Remember, this one runs the lower set of handles, and then you'll just raise this, and this thing will go pretty fast. It'll take 5 seconds to get all the way to the top. And you'll drop off, put your other pipe on, and then drop it down a little bit and spin into it from the top. Remember, your spin is here. Table clamp. This one's real important. There's a reason this one has a safety on it. Your table clamp is right here. This is the part that actually catches the pipe. When you got a pipe midway, whoever the assistant driller is, back up just a little, we'll run this thing. We call this the slip. So when the pipe is right there ready to be changed, he'll take this thing and shove it in until it locks. And then this pin will drop in right there. We'll have some video of that here too. Once this is slid all the way in, then you're ready for your table clamp. The table clamp is on a hydraulic cylinder back here. It's a small cylinder, but it's extremely powerful. You can lose a hand. If someone's hands are in here and doing something, it's very important that the driller make sure that everyone's back when this part happens. So you pull this down is clamp. This thing will come in and it'll pinch that pipe right there. And that'll keep the pipe from going down in the hole. When you pinch the pipe, you might want to come around to this side, can you? Come around on this side of it so you can see it from the side. When you pinch the pipe, you see how the pipe is 1.25 inches here and then it flares up. This part that flares up has to be above the table clamp, because that's what actually catches that keeps it from falling down farther in the hole. That table clamp can be anywhere from here down to here, anywhere in this zone, and you'll be fine. These little notches in the pipe are to keep it from spinning when you unhook it. You see how the table clamp has a V right here? That V is what accepts that little ridge in the pipe. So one ridge goes there and the other one comes to the to the slip, which is right here. And when those are pinched and you want to turn this piece out, you just back it up and it'll start spinning backwards. And then those little deals here catch there and keep the pipe from spinning. And then this just spins its way out. And then you'll help it settle upwards by using your pull down. It'll just gradually come up, and as soon as it clears, then you can switch back down low and use your top head to go up quickly, and then grab your other pipe. The reason this has a safety on it, when we're pulling pipe out of a hole, let's say we've got a 100-foot hole and we're done drilling. You know, if they're, depending on how you're going to pull it out, you'll pull your pipe up, you'll get it to here. There'll be one pipe in the air. The pipe that's in the air, we'll use the pipe wrench to unscrew, and then we'll set it to the side, and we'll have some good video of that here in a little bit. The importance of this thing is that we never accidentally unclamp this table clamp until we've got something else screwed in there. Like we've got it's a little blue top head screw, or there's a little chain. Either way, something's got to be screwed in there, supported by the winch, before we let that go. Otherwise, your pipe and bit and everything will fall all the way to the bottom of the hole. That's also another very bad day. So that safety is there for a reason. We don't want anyone grabbing that thing by mistake when they're supposed to be grabbing the top head. So you have to flip that up to actually engage that. Your last lever here is winch line. This is a winch in my hand. Runs all the way to the top. Use the winch for two things. Let's say we're grabbing another pipe. If this was all open, we've got a clamp that goes on here, and we'll have some video of that as well. Then this hooks to there, and the driller will actually use this to go up. It lifts up, and then while it's going up, the driller wants to take the pipe, slide it back so the tip of it's right back here, and then that's how you get it up in the air, swing it over, and put it up here for drilling. You'll see some detail of exactly what happens from there. The pipe screws into the next pipe down. Once you screw it in, you let your winch down, and the piece that's holding the pipe actually slips all the way down the pipe, down here to the bottom. Then you unhook it. You just kind of throw it around your back like that, and it'll stay there until you're ready for it again. Once the pipe is on, sticking up in the air, this thing's already up there, and you pull down a little bit so it settles real slow. You'll engage your drill, because remember, you have to turn into here. This piece here has to spin in. It comes about this fast, and once it grabs, you kind of notice it. Once it starts to grab, you go back to neutral with this, so you're not pressing down on your table clamp, and it'll grab. And the driller just kind of, you have to hold the pipe and kind of watch it, and you'll see how we kind of guide it in. Once it grabs, then you quit turning, because remember, it's going to snag here once everything's tight. So you turn the drill off. We'll raise it up just a hair. The driller will back the table clamp off once he's absolutely sure everything's tight, top and bottom, and then the slip pulls back. Now we're ready to drill again. When we go to drill, we turn on our water first, always the water first. Then we engage the turning mechanism, which is here, and then we'll pull down, and the pull down is what lets it settle. and that's it. You just do that over and over and over until you get where you need to be. Guys, I can't emphasize enough the importance of this pinch area here. We don't want hands resting even in here like this. It's a real bad pinch area when we're pulling pipe using the pipe wrench. That's one thing. But even if this thing is slid forward, we don't want our hands here. We don't want them like in here, because this will get you. In here, and there's some space there, but still, let's just not have our hands, if we're talking to the driller, let's not be like this or this, because if all of a sudden something happens and the driller halts for the slip, doesn't know you're standing here, whoever's over here may take this thing and just jam it back or jam it forward, and you get busy drilling and everything's loud. They may not know your hands there, may not notice, and let's just prevent any kind of injuries like that. Pre-op checks every day. On the air compressor, you've got a radiator cap up on top. You need to check that every day. It's also duplicated down here. We can go ahead and check both. You've got your antifreeze here. It's on cold, so that's just right. This is your fuel tank. The guys to transfer diesel will set jugs up here and siphon diesel into it. And then down here, you've got a engine oil level dipstick. We check that every day as well. On the hydraulic pump engine, it's a little more simple. You've got a engine oil dipstick on this side, kind of right below the starter, above the oil pump or by the oil filter. And then you've got your radiator up here. That's basically all the checks we've got on it. Something we want to watch. You see the clamp right here that holds the cover for the air filter? This right here. This little screw here will back off, whether it's the vibration of the engine or the road or whatever. That's something we've noticed. You really want to keep an eye on that. Couple other things that we have to make sure are tight every once in a while. All the connections on the starter, because of this thing, the way it vibrates, we've had them come loose and had to put them back on. This thing vibrates a little bit. Try to make sure that the bolts that hold it on are tight. It's not going to come off on us. Come around this side. Now to start this thing, it's got a manual fuel pump shut off. The solenoid on it really has never worked. Can you see my finger right here? Can you see that? Okay. When that's all the way up, the fuel's completely off. You see this little tarp strap here? This tarp strap has a hook right here and an eye right here. If you pull it down that far and get that to hook, this is down, and that'll let fuel into the engine. Okay, so when we go start it now, it's just going to run, and the only way you can shut it off then is taking this, letting that up, and sometimes it'll sputter a little bit. You have to take your finger and go ahead and hold it all the way up to kill that fuel. So we're going to put it up right there so it's ready to start for us. Guys, other than that, as far as pre-op checks, there's not a lot. There's 2 Honda engines. We like to check oil nose, make sure they're full of gas. The local guys don't always remember to fill these things full of diesel, so we try to make sure we do that before we leave every day, and then fill the jugs up on our way in at night. That's really it. About every 3-4 days, we'll go through and do a spot check on all the bolts. The bolts that hold the air compressor down to the trailer. There's a bunch of 1/2-inch bolts around it. We'll just put a wrench on them, see if there's any play. If there's anything at all, we'll tighten them up. So far in the last 10 days, we haven't gotten anything out of any of them, so that's been really good. Same way on the trailer, we've got bolts up on the front of the hitches. Check those, make sure those hitches are stout to the trailer. Make sure that the engine mounts here are secure. Just anywhere there's a bolt, there's a hydraulic fitting. It doesn't hurt every 3-4 days, just to go around, put a wrench on them, make sure there's no play in it. The roads here are extremely rough. These trailers are heavy duty and very rigid, so there's not a lot of shock absorption even through the tires. Something we did change, these tires were rated for I think 50 or 60 pounds pressure. These were rated for about 6,000 pounds a piece. We let them down to 25 psi just because it's not bouncing anything apart near like it was. Even though we're on torsion axles, having these tires at 25 psi is critical. Check the air pressure in the tires every 4 or 5 days. The guys don't necessarily remember to check tire pressure at all. That's something we want to check just to make sure we're not running anything and overloading one tire because one's flat, and it'd be really hard to tell on the front when it feels flat. Before you start drilling, Once your rig is set up, like once you unhook it, you see these jacks here in the back. These aren't to unhook from a trailer, obviously, because it hooks up in the front. These are for leveling. We've got a couple little 10-inch torpedo levels up in the toolbox, front right-hand side. When we unhook from the truck, kind of like while we're digging our pit, we'll lay that torpedo level just right here on the slip, and we'll measure it this way and then this way, get the thing kind of centered. Once we put on our first stick of pipe, we'll raise it up in the air, we'll move our slip in so it's definitely centered where it's going to be drilling, and we'll measure the pipe then. We'll make sure the pipe is level. It's nice that the trailer is level, but it's critical that the pipe be level both side to side and front to back, so we're not drilling at a crazy angle. It's still going to drill that way, but if you start drilling at an angle, it's probably going to find its own level and curve down. It could make it pretty difficult to put our casing in, by the end of the day if you're going to put in a lot of casing. We want casing to go in as smoothly as possible. Generator. With the new hitch we've got on the front, generally the air compressor is already level. It's not critical that it be just perfect bubble, but you definitely don't want it sitting on an angle. The way the oil flow draws in and the way everything works on it, we want it pretty close. So, just get in the habit of putting the level up there on top of that air compressor. Just, check it one way then the other. If we need to put block under one tire or something to get it up, usually it's on level front to back. If we're kind of backing onto a hill or something, let the jack down. Let's get that thing, just pretty close. The startup on the drill rig, you've got one ignition switch right here. So you go to there and just turn it to start. And if it doesn't start, then you just bump it again. Remember, there is no off here. The off is the disconnection of the fuel pump manually. On the generator, it's a little bit different. This is your panel. You'll kick this thing into on. You see the red light come on? And then you'll start it by just pressing that up and it'll start immediately. Notice that your arrow here has to be in warm-up control. All these instructions are written on the door right here. And we check fluid levels, level compressor, crack open air valves, which they have self-cracking vents on them. So as soon as this thing kicks on, they kind of go shh until they pressure up completely, and they go shut. Turn black switch. Everything is listed right here for you. But once this is warm up, you'll start it, and then eventually this red light, while it's running, will go off. You kick it over to run, and then it'll go ahead and pressure everything up. But it lets the engine basically warm up without any load on it. And then once it's warmed up, you kick it to run, then you'll hear air kind of pressure up and you're ready to go. It does have safeties on to shut down if your water temperature gets over 260. If your water temperature goes over 260, any of the flashes here for engine temperature and all that kind of stuff, it's got all the safeties on it to kill it. Hour meter, engine coolant temperature, and then the temperature of the discharge. Discharge temperature on these is extremely high, like 250, 260 degrees. If this thing's been running for more than 20 minutes, you do not want to have your hands on these things. They will burn you. You'll be able to tell when you get about here that they're hot. So when you go to unhook these things at the end of the day, just have gloves on. Turn these things off. Make sure they're bled out. Don't try to unhook it. If these hoses aren't flexible like that, make sure they're not pressured up. If this doesn't turn easy like that, you need to bleed off the pressure. And you can bleed it off over there at the drill rig just by turning on either of the little air deals and get those bled off. There's 4 gauges on the drill rig. These two are engine related. You've got oil pressure and water temperature. Now, we've never even come close to getting this thing, I think, above 160 because the engine that's on this thing just idles. We don't have it even revved anywhere near half throttle. It just idles, so we've never run it hot. But it's something you got to keep your eye on as you're drilling. Keep these gauges clean, keep an eye on them. Gauges over here are for the actual drill rig itself. We talked about the pull down pressure. Remember this thing? This lever here makes it go up and down if you're switching pipes. And this is the one used for drilling. So that's where you put it if you're wanting to drill and come down and settle. You measure the push down, the actual pull down pressure with this gauge right here. Like if we're drilling through sand or light clay, that gauge will never come off 0. If you start getting into some heavy clay or like sheet rock, this thing will come up into 500, and you control the max, like whatever the max you want it to push down with this little dial. If this dial is pegged all the way clockwise, you can spike this thing up to about 1,200 pounds, which is pretty dangerous because at that point you're starting to lift the rig off the ground, you're putting a lot of undue pressure on the pipe, and you'll snap pipes. There's some times you may want to do that just briefly if you think you need to try to poke through some rock. For the most part, we try not to drill anything over 500. So if that thing starts to spike, you just turn this thing counterclockwise, and you can control that area if you want at 500, 700, 300. So that's your control for that. This other hydraulic gauge here is actually measures the pressure on this pump right here. Remember, this is the pump that makes your bit turn. If you're drilling in clay, maybe this thing kind of just sits steady at about 200. If you get into some rock where I'm not talking about like sheet rock, I'm talking about like big gravel kind of rock. That bit down there, that wedge bit, every time it comes around, it starts catching, and the pipe will kind of be jerking. You'll see this thing start spiking maybe to 700, 1,000, 1,500. It'll just sit there and start flicking. Every time that bit comes around and takes a bite, this gauge will pop. Nothing you need to watch on that. It's just informational as far as being able to kind of give good information to your log keeper about what you're drilling through. If your pipe is popping and kind of jumping and that kind of stuff, and this thing's spinning all over the place, you probably want to slow down just a little bit and really make sure if you're drilling with water that all your cuttings are coming up, because that means you're drilling through some pretty sizable rock, just gravel zones. That's all I've got for now. We'll have some footage of the drill and that kind of thing, how it all works. And you guys just remember we talked about the pinch points in here and all that. And when you see us actually drilling, a lot more of that will make sense. The other thing you want to watch for is the pipes that are overhead. There's usually one guy who puts the slip on here with a chain on it, and then this cable here clamps onto it, and when it raises up, it comes up this way, and a lot of times the driller will take it and flick it back this way. It'll kind of zing out here, so that's easy to go up with. Really, you want to keep this area totally clean. The only person that should be in this area is kind of the driller. You may have a guy helping with a slip who's hanging out right here, but from here this way, you really want to keep that area totally clean. What you don't want is a guy hanging out here, looking at the hole when the driller takes that pipe, flings it behind him, catches him in the ear. I'm guessing that'd be another very bad day. So just keep that area totally clear. But yeah, we'll break all the footage down as far as how we set pipe when we're drilling, what we do when we switch pipes. We'll see if we can, if it's quiet enough, we'll see if we can get the audio in there on how the switches work and exactly what we're doing, so that all kind of makes sense. And then we'll have some video later of actually pulling pipe. When you're done drilling, you can either pull pipe out with the top head spinning it. Like if you think you have a lot of clay, we'll go ahead and spin the pipe all the way out. If you're drilling in sand and rock, a lot of times we'll just put a cable on there and just pull the pipe straight up. It's way faster, but if you're in clay, you take a chance of building a lot of stuff up inside the hole and kind of bunking it up in there, and your casing won't go down. So usually we try to spin out if we think there's any chance we have clay in there at all. We'll have some of that, and then setting the casing. The casing is the actual blue pipe. That's the actual well part. The bottom will have a screen where the water runs in. Everything else will be the solid casing that's just basically protects the purity of the well, keeps all the crud out. We'll have some video of how that goes in, the gravel pack, and all that kind of stuff. But that'll be here following. So that's it. Thanks.